Hello students, myself Misha Shatabdi Dhar, and as I have told you that the brief question of 2016 of computer network subject I will discuss now. I am going to discuss in this video. Now the first question is distinguish between UTP and STP. Both of UTP and STP are cables, you know that. So the answer will be like that. STP cables are shielded while UTP cables are unshielded. STP cables are most immune to interference and noise than UTP cables. STP cables are better than maximizing bandwidth compared to UTP cables. STP cables cost more per meter compared to UTP cables. STP cables are heavier per meter compared to UTP cables. UTP cables are more prevalent in SOHO network while STP is used in more higher end applications. The next part in question number 2 is what do you mean by CDMA? Now, CDMA, that is code division multiple access, is a channel access method used by various radio communication technologies. It is a form of multiplexing which allows numerous signals to occupy a single transmission channel, optimizing the use of available bandwidth. The technology is used in ultra high frequency cellular telephone system in the 800 MHz and 1.9 GHz bands. CDMA employs analog to digital conversion, that is ADC, in combination with spread spectrum technology. Audio input is first digitized into binary elements. The frequency of the transmitted signal is then made to vary according to a defined pattern, that is code, so it can be intercepted only by a receiver whose frequency response is programmed with the same code. So it follows exactly analog with the transmitter frequency. There are trillions of possible frequency sequencing codes which enhances privacy and makes cloning difficult. The original CDMA standard, also known as CDMA 1 and still common in cellular telephones, in the US offers a transmission speed of only up to 14.4 kbps in its single channel form and up to 115 kbps in an 8 channel form. CDMA 2000 and wideband CDMA delivered data many times faster. Now the last part of the question number 2 is describe different types of CSMA with proper flowchart. There are 3 different types of CSMA protocols. Number 1 is one persistent CSMA. Number 2, non-persistent CSMA, and number 3 is p-persistent CSMA. Now one persistent CSMA. In this method, station that want to transmit data continuously senses the channel to check whether the channel is idle or busy. If the channel is busy, the station waits until it becomes idle. When the station detects an idle channel, it immediately transmits the frame with probability 1. Hence, it is called one persistent CSMA. This method has the highest chance of collision because 2 or more stations may find channel to be idle at the same time and transmit their frames. When the collision occurs, the station wait a random amount of time and start all over again. Now, the non-persistent CSMA. In this scheme, if a station wants to transmit a frame and it finds that the channel is busy, like some other station is transmitting, then it will wait for fixed interval of time. After this time, it again checks the status of the channel, and if the channel is free, it will transmit. A station that has a frame to send senses the channel. If the channel is idle, it sends immediately. If the channel is busy, it waits a random amount of time and then senses the channel again. In non-persistent CSMA, the station does not continuously sense the channel for the purpose of capturing it when it detects the end of previous transmission. And the last one is P-persistent CSMA. This method is using when channel has time slots such that the time slot duration is equal to or greater than the maximum propagation delay time. Whenever a station becomes ready to send, it senses the channel. If channel is busy, station waits until next slot. If channel is idle, it transmits with a probability of P, with the probability Q equal to 1 minus P. The station then waits for the beginning of the next time slot. If the next slot is also idle, it either transmits or waits again the probability P and Q. This process is repeated till either frame has been transmitted or another station has begun transmitting. In case of the transmission by another station, the station acts as though a collision has occurred and it waits a random amount of time and starts again. Here you can see the diagram of P-persistent CSMA. Now here comes the question number 3. In question number 3, the first question is, what are the advantages and disadvantages of secret key encryption? Advantage of secret key encryption is secret key algorithms are efficient. It takes less time to encrypt a message. The reason is that the key is usually smaller, so it is used to encrypt or decrypt long messages. And what are the disadvantages of secret key encryption? Each pair of user must have a secret key. If n number of people is in world want to use this method, there needs to be n multiplied with n minus 1 by 2 secret keys. For 1 million people to communicate, 500 million secret keys are needed. The distribution of the keys between two parties can be very difficult. The second part of the question number 3 is distinguish between symmetric and asymmetric key cryptography. Symmetric encryption uses a single secret key that needs to be shared among the people who needs to receive the message, while asymmetric encryption uses a pair of public key and a private key to encrypt and decrypt messages when communicating. Symmetric key encryption is an age-old technique, while asymmetric encryption is relatively new. Asymmetric encryption was introduced to complement the inherent problem of the need to share the key in symmetric encryption model, eliminating that need to share the key by using a pair of public-private keys. The third part of question number 3 is what is digital signature? Digital signatures are based on public key cryptography, also known as asymmetric cryptography. Using a public key algorithm such as RSA, one can generate two keys that are mathematically linked, one private and one public, to create a digital signature. The signing software such as an email program creates a one-way hash of the electronic data to be signed. The private key is then used to encrypt the hash. The encrypted hash along with other information such as the hashing algorithm is the digital signature. The reason of encrypting the hash instead of the entire message or document is that a hash function can convert an arbitrary input into a fixed length value, which is usually much shorter. This saves time since hashing is much faster than signing. The value of the hash is unique to the hashed data. Any change in the data, even changing or deleting a single character, results in a different value. This attribute enables others to validate the integrity of the data by using the signer's public key to decrypt the hash. If the decrypted hash matches a second computed hash of the same data, it proves that the data hasn't changed since it was signed. If the two hashes don't match, the data has either been tampered with in some way, that is integrity, or the signature was created with a private key that doesn't correspond to the public key presented by the signer authentication. Now the question number 4. The first part of question number 4 is distinguish between synchronous and asynchronous TDM with proper diagram. Now the first parameter should be walking. In synchronous TDM, data flow of each input connection is divided into units and each input occupies one output time slot. In asynchronous TDM, slots are allotted dynamically. That is, input line is given slots in output frame if and only if it has data to send. The second parameter is given that number of slots. In synchronous TDM, number of slots in each frame are equal to number of input lines. But in asynchronous TDM, number of slots in each frame are less than the number of input lines. The third parameter is buffer. Buffering is not done frame instant after a particular interval of time whether someone has data to send or not. But in asynchronous TDM, buffering is done and only those inputs are given slots in output frame whose buffer contains data to send. The next parameter is addressing. Slots in synchronous TDM carry data only and there is no need of addressing, synchronization and pre-assigned relationships between input and outputs that serve as an address. But in asynchronous TDM, slots contain both data and address of the destination. The next parameter is synchronization. Synchronization bits are used at the beginning of each frame, but in asynchronous TDM, no synchronization bits are used. The next parameter is capacity. The max bandwidth utilization if all inputs have data to send. And in asynchronous, the capacity of link is normally less than the sum of capacity of each channel. The next parameter is data separation. In synchronous TDM, demultiplexer at receiving end decomposes each frame, discards framing bits and extracts data unit in turn. This extracted data unit from frame is then passed to destination device. In asynchronous TDM, demultiplexer at receiving end decomposes each frame by checking local address of each data unit. This extracted data unit from frame is then passed to destination device. And here is the diagram. The second part of question number 4 is explain cyclic redundancy check, that is what is CRC. A CRC, that is cyclic redundancy check, is an error detecting code commonly used in digital networks and storage devices to detect accidental changes to raw data. Blocks of data entering this system get a short check value attached based on the remainder of a polynomial division of their contents. On retrieval, the calculation is repeated, and in the event the check values do not match, corrective action can be taken against data corruption. A CRC enabled device calculates a short fixed length binary sequence known as the check value or CRC for each block of data to be sent or sorted and appends it to the data forming a code word. When a code word is received or read, the device either compares its check value with one freshly calculated from the data block or equivalently performs a CRC on the whole code word and compares the resulting check value with an expected received constant. If the CRC check values do not match, then the block contains a data error. The device may take corrective action such as rereading the block or requesting that it be sent again. Otherwise, the data is assumed to be error-free, though with some small probability. It may contain undetected errors. This is the fundamental nature of error checking. The next part of the question number 4 is compare FDM and WDM. Basic concept behind both the FDM and WDM is same, but WDM is possible only in optical fibers and thus can only be used to multiplex optical signals. However, FDM can be used to multiplex both. Now, the question number 5 is write short note on the following. Number A is cybercrime. And I know that you all know what is cybercrime. Any crime that involves a computer and a network is called a computer crime or cybercrime. For the purpose, a computer may have been used to commit such crime, or simply a computer may be the target. Another term called internet crime refers to criminal activities for exploiting the internet. These crimes include and is not limited to identity theft threatening a nation's security, copyright infringement, and child pornography. These crimes have become a threat to individual privacy, where confidential data, individuals' identity or photos and videos etc. is stolen or intercepted by the attackers. In cybercrime such as identity theft, financial theft, espionage, mostly non-state agents and government organizations are involved. Now, the types of cybercrime. First one is computer intrusion. Computer intrusion is any malicious activity that harms a computer or causes a computer or a computer network to work in an unexpected manner. These attacks involve spreading of virus, denial of services, or exploitation of the operating system or a software feature. The next one is social engineering. The term social engineering means to fool a user by sending him an email or calling him to provide confidential data like password etc. The next one is masquerading. In this type of attack, a system is fooled into giving access by sending a TCP packet that has a forked source address, which makes the packet appears to come from a trusted host. Next is denial of service, that is DOS attack. This type of attack intent is to make resources or service unavailable to its intended users. Such as DOS attacks are carried out on websites to stop them from functioning. Next is Smurf attack. This attack generates large amount of traffic on a victim network, which causes the network to crash. Smurf attack is a type of DOS attack. Next is Fraggle attack. It is a type of DOS attack where the attacker sends a large amount of UDP echo traffic to IP broadcast addresses. Email bombing means sending thousands of email to a victim, causing the victim's mail account or mail server to crash. Next is logic bomb. A logic bomb is an event driver attack. This type of attack activates only if certain event occurs. Next is salami attack, and this is the last one. This type of attack is carried out of financial gains. In salami attack, the key is to make changes so small that in a single case it can go unnoticed. For instance, a bank employee deducts $2 from every single customer or transaction. The customer is unlikely to notice the change, but the employee gets a fortune. The next short note is on X.25 protocol. X.25 is a standard suite of protocols used for packet switching across computer networks. The X.25 protocols works as the physical data link and network layers, layer from 1 to 3 of OSI model. Each X.25 packets contains up to 128 bytes of data. The X.25 network handles packet assembly at the source device, delivery, and then de-assembly at the destination. X.25 packet delivery technology includes not only switching and network layer routing but also error checking and retransmission logic should be delivery failure occur. X.25 supports multiple simultaneous conversations by multiplexing packets and usual virtual communication channels. X.25 was originally designed more than 25 years ago to carry voice over analog telephones lines, that is dial-up networks. Typical applications of X.25 today include automatic teller machine networks and credit card verification networks. X.25 also supports a variety of mainframe terminal or server applications. With the widespread acceptance of Internet Protocol as a standard for corporate networks, many X.25 applications are now being migrated to cheaper solutions using IP as the network layer protocol and replacing the lower layers of X.25 with Ethernet or ATM hardware. Now, here comes the question number 6. Write the short note on the followings. The first part is ARP. ARP stands for Address Resolution Protocol. It is a protocol used by IP, specifically IPv4. This protocol operates below the network layer as a part of the interface between the OSI network and OSI link layer. It is used to map logical addresses to the physical addresses used by a data link protocol. ARP Simplify converts IP address to physical address. It is relatively simple request and reply protocol. Here you can see the ARP request and reply. ARP maintains the mapping between IP address and MAC address in a table in memory called ARP cache. The entries in the table are dynamically added and removed. A host will update its ARP cache only if the ARP request is for its IP address. Otherwise, it will discard the ARP request. Consider the above figure. In this, a host send out the request message. It is looking for the MAC address of the node with IP address 192.168.1.220. The node with the IP address 192.168.1.220 sends out the reply message. In reply message, it sends its MAC address to the host. The next short note in question number 6 is ICMP. Internet Control Message Protocol, that is ICMP, is a TCP/IP network layer protocol that provides troubleshooting, control and error message services. ICMP is most frequently used in OS for networked computers where it transmits error messages. ICMP for Internet Protocol version 4 is called ICMP v4, and for Internet Protocol version 6 it is called ICMP v6. Internet Control Message Protocol is also known as RFC 792. In ICMP message is created An ICMP message is created as a result of errors in an IP datagram or for diagnostic routing purpose. These errors are reported to the originating datagram's source IP address. In ICMP message is encapsulated directly within a single IP datagram and reports errors in the processing of datagram. And ICMP headers begin after the IPv header. An ICMP packet has an 8-bit headers followed by a variable sized data section. The first 4 bytes of the header are fixed. Those are ICMP type, ICMP code, checksum of the entire ICMP message and checksum of the entire ICMP message. The remaining 4 bytes of the header vary based on the ICMP type and code. The error message associated with ICMP includes a data section that holds the entire IP header along with the first 8 bytes of the packet that generates the error message. An ICMP datagram is then encapsulated in a new datagram. Now the question number 7. Write the short note on the followings. First one is token ring and token bus. A token ring network, as you can see in this diagram, is a local area network topology where nodes or stations are arranged in a ring topology. Data passes sequentially between nodes on the network until it returns to the source station. To prevent congestion and collision, a token ring topology uses a token to ensure that only one node or station on the line is used at a time, thereby easily denoting media users of its activity. Now, a token bus network is much like a token ring network except that the ends of the network do not meet to form the ring. Instead, the network is still terminated at both ends. A token is still required before a node can be used the network. Like in a token ring, it needs to include the address of the destination along with the data it needs to send. Although in the token bus it implements a virtual ring or virtual ring on the coaxial cable. Though both topologies use tokens, the similarities end there, as token bus uses a different topology and the token passing protocol is different. In a token ring network, the token and data is passed to the next physical node along the line. But in a token bus network, it does not matter where the nodes are physically located, since token passing is done via a numeric sequence of data addresses. The token or data is passed to the next sequential node address, no matter if the physical location of that node is at the very end of the bus network. This is a virtual ring. The physical layout of the network will not change it. And the next part of the question is HDLC frame format. An HDLC frame is structured as follows, that is flag, address, control, information, FCS and flag. Flag, the 8-bit pattern, that is 0 1 1 1 1 1 1 0, which signals the beginning and the end of an HDLC frame. If a piece of data within the frame to be transmitted contains a series of 5 or more ones, the transmitting station must insert a 0 to distinguish the set of ones in the data from the flags at the beginning and the end of the frame. This technique of inserting bits is called bit stuffing. These bits are detected and removed upon receipt. If a pattern of 5 ones is followed by a 1 and then a 0, it marks that end of the frame. If a pattern of 5 ones is followed by 2 more ones, it is a signal from the transmitting station to abort. The address field always contains the address of a secondary station. When the primary station transmits, it is the receiving secondary station's address. If it is a secondary responding, it is its own address. The field is only populated for unbalanced connections. It is otherwise empty or point-to-point, that is balanced links. The format of the control field varies with the data it contains. There are 3 categories of HDLC frames. Information, that is I frame, which carries data. Next is supervisory, that is S frame, which carries commands and responses. And the last one is unnumbered, that is U frame, which carries additional command sequences. The next question is explain firewall. Question number 8. First part is explain firewall with proper diagram. A firewall is a network security system that monitors and controls the incoming and outgoing network traffic based on predetermined security rules. Now here the diagram is given. In this network, the box labeled IDS is an intrusion detection system which may be a computer or device designed to log network activity and detect any suspicious activity. In this diagram, it is shown outside the firewall on the semi-private network and protecting the servers on the private network. It may be a good idea to place an IDS just inside the firewall to protect the entire private network, since an attack may be first launched against a workstation before being launched against a server. The IDs protecting the servers could not be moved to protect the entire private network. But depending on cost and requirements, it is also good to protect our servers, especially the mail server. The semi-private network is commonly called a DMZ in many security circles. In this diagram, the semi-private network contains a mail relay box to increase security since the mail server is not directly accessed. The mail relay box routes mail between the internet and the mail server. The next part is explain different types of IP addressing technique with example. IP addresses can be assigned randomly provided that each IP address is a technique address. This uniqueness is essential to avoid sending data to multiple destinations or to the wrong destination. An IP address can be a static or a dynamic IP address. A static IP address is a permanent internet address and will never change. A dynamic IP address changes every time a device connects to the internet. So, a dynamic address is considered a temporary address. Now, IPv4 classes. Type of IPv4 classes can be categorized into 5 classes, namely class A, class B, class C, class D and class E. Class A, B and C are commonly used for devices to connect to the internet. Each class provides a range of IP addresses and the following are the classes. Here you can see the range and number of hosts and the network classes provides. Now question number 9. The first part is distinguish between static and dynamic routing algorithm technique with example. Static routing manually sets up optimal paths between the source and destination computers. On the other hand, dynamic routing uses dynamic protocols to update the routing table and to find the optimal path between the source and the destination computers. Routers that use static routing do not have any controlling mechanism if they come across any faults in the routing paths. These routers do not sense faulty computers encountered while finding the path between two computers or routers in a network. Dynamic routing algorithm can sense a faulty router in the network. Also, dynamic routers eliminate the faulty router and find out another optimal path from the source to the destination. If any router is down or faulty due to certain reasons, this fault is circulated in the entire network due to this quality and dynamic routers. They are also called adaptive routers. Static routing is suitable for very small networks. They cannot be used in large networks. But dynamic routing is used for larger networks. Manual routing has no specific routing algorithm. Dynamic routers are based on various routing algorithms like OSPF, that is Open Shortest Path First, Interior Gateway Routing Protocol, and Routing Information Protocol. Static routing is the simplest way of routing data packets from a source to a destination in a network. Dynamic routing uses complex algorithms for routing data packets. Static routers have an advantage as they require minimal memory. Dynamic routers, however, have quite a few memory overheads depending on the algorithms used. In case of static routing, network administrators find out the optimal path and make changes in the routing table. In dynamic routing, the algorithm and the protocol is responsible for routing the packets and making the changes accordingly in the routing table. Now the next part is what is congestion control and distinguish leaky bucket algorithm and token bucket algorithm. Congestion control controls traffic entry into a telecommunications network to avoid congestive collapse by avoiding over subscription by reducing the rate of packets. It should not be confused with flow control, which prevents the sender from overwhelming the receiver. Now distinguish between leaky bucket algorithm and token bucket algorithm. Token bucket algorithm is token dependent and leaky bucket algorithm is token independent. Token bucket. If bucket is full, token are discarded but not the packet. But in leaky bucket, if bucket is full, packet or data is discarded. In token bucket, packets can only transmitted when there are enough token. But in leaky bucket, packets are transmitted continuously. In token bucket, it allows large bursts to be sent faster rate after the constant rate. But in leaky bucket, it sends the packet at constant rate. In token bucket, it saves token to send large bursts. But in leaky bucket, it does not save any token. Now all the answers are discussed within this video.